Hi, I'm Debbie Harbeck, and I'm a certified life coach working with women in midlife and through the menopause transition. So each week, I'll be sharing the latest information, inspiration, and generate some momentum so you can move forward and feel more in control of your changing midlife body and your life. Let's go. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm happy you're here today. We're talking about time management or managing your time. And I should start out with the fact that I really don't love that term. I don't love the term time management because honestly, time just is. And it's happening whether we like it or not. So it can't really be managed. But what we can manage is what we do with our time. And we can also manage our energy around the things we want to get done. So these are the things I'll be talking about in the podcast today. And in midlife, I think we realize that time is a gift. It's even more of a gift now because I don't think we can ever talk about time without realizing that it's limited. We don't have all the time in the world. And I know we don't like to think about it that way, but if we're really aware that we have limited time, we're actually a lot less likely to waste it. So I just read a book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for some inspiration or even a kick in the butt to get things done. And it will definitely give you a wake-up call. Basically, he's waking us up to the fact that on average, we each only have about 4,000 weeks in this lifetime. And if you're my age, you've already spent about 2,500 of those weeks. I know it's scary, but it's a very real, and we really only have a limited time here. So if there are things that are important to you, things you want to get done, now is the time to really think about them and do them. For me, I can sometimes get caught up in the fact that time is speeding by or that there's so many things I want to do and so little time to get it done. And as a coach, time is a topic that comes up in almost every single coaching session that I do in one way or another. Either we're talking about a schedule that's way too booked or too crowded, or there's too many unplanned things that tend to come up, or we just easily get distracted, or there's even an emotion like guilt when it comes to actually taking time for the things we want to do. And the fact is, we're not robots. As humans, we can't just create a rigid schedule that gets everything we want done, because the unexpected does show up, and because we're surrounded by temptation and distraction, and because we feel emotions like guilt and confusion and resistance and even more. And all of that can completely derail even our best laid plans. So how do we get things done? Especially the things we really want to get done. So I was faced with this question last year because I opened up my coaching practice to welcome high school students. Specifically, I've been coaching high school students now for almost a year as they go through the process of applying for college. And in particular, we're talking U.S. colleges. And if you don't know about this process, it is super overwhelming and time-consuming. In addition to just filling out applications, there are so many essays they have to do for each college they apply to, which can be completely different from college to college, as well as projects and competitions and volunteer work and extracurriculars, all of these things that help the student stand out. And it is just a lot of work in a very limited amount of time. Luckily, I had been coaching women in midlife, and there too, a big part of my work was about and is about managing time. So working with these students was actually not a huge leap for me. And it actually helped me when it came to coaching my regular clients because I got to learn a lot more about what it takes to manage time. So that's what I want to share with you here. How can you get the things done that you really want to get done, right? So there are 3 steps, and I've broken it down here. So the first one is, what specifically do you want? So this may sound like a no-brainer question on the surface, but most of us are going about doing things, we're taking action, but we're not really clear about what we specifically want to get out of it. So for example, there was a student I was working with who said she wanted to get into med school. And although she was busy, she was taking action, she was doing well in school, but she was also very distracted and resisting some of the things she had to do to apply for college. And when we really dug into it with her, she didn't want to get into med school at all because she wasn't interested in it. So she was unconsciously sabotaging her efforts by not doing some of the work. And I also see this happen with my midlife clients when they're really not clear about what they want. So for example, a client says she wants to lose weight. What are the specifics of that, right? So one of my clients decided on weight loss as one of her goals, and she was struggling to find time to work out 3 times a week for an hour. Now, working out 3 times a week at the gym for an hour was something she felt was necessary to lose weight. It was something she had in her brain, but she wasn't doing it. So when we really dug down into it, it wasn't about the time. She actually had the time. It was about resistance. She wanted to lose weight, but she wasn't really clear on what that looked like or why she wanted it. And when we figured out the why, which had to do with there was an event 4 months out from that time where she was going to have to dress up, we could then focus on what she needed to do. And then going to the gym for an hour 3 times a week wasn't really a requirement. So once you're clear on what you specifically want, and even better, why you want it, then the next step is to define the small, and it's important to say small, but specific steps to getting there. And actually making those steps seem pretty easy and doable in the time that you do have. So a big goal can seem overwhelming. Weight loss can seem overwhelming, like climbing a mountain. But what you need to do to get to that big goal should actually be fairly small and simple, like writing a book. And I was just speaking with Allegra Houston in the last episode of the podcast, and she was talking about writing in 10-minute chunks of time. She focuses on writing for 10 minutes. She doesn't focus on writing a book. And with the student, she was able to shift her focus from med school to a whole new major. And her motivation completely changed when she got clear. She defined the steps she needed to apply, and she was actually looking forward to the research and work that she was going to have to produce for her application. And in the case of my client who wanted to look great in the dress for the event, we had to define the steps to getting there, which included actually finding a dress that she loved, which was kind of fun, and then small steps for her physical body, like drinking more water, getting outside to walk each day, eating when she wasn't hungry. These were small steps that compounded over time, but also the small emotional steps, like her mindset and working on what she needed to think and feel in order to feel good in that dress on that day. So again, it's never about the big chunk of time it takes to do something big. It's about focusing on the small amounts of time it takes to do each step to get there. And then the third step is to be forgiving. And as I mentioned, we're human. Unexpected things will happen and we get distracted. So we've got to allow a lot of flexibility in the process of getting to where we want to go. There's no one perfect way to get anywhere. There's only the way that you make perfect. So remembering and allowing for failures and distractions and interruptions and not beating yourself up about them, but instead taking a moment to forgive yourself, then you can continue to move forward. Forgiveness is a key to almost everything because it's admitting that you're not perfect and that that's okay. Your imperfect self will get to the outcome you're looking for. So in a nutshell, these are my 3 steps to getting things done when it seems like you don't have the time. Now, there are 2 skills actually that I want to also mention that help make these 3 steps possible. So the first one is to make tough choices. And the choices you're making, especially the tough ones, aren't about what to do, but usually they're about what you have to let go of. So if you want the time to do the things you want to do, you've got to let go of the things that don't support where you're going. I know this is tough. I know it can be, but making the decision to, for example, uninstall Facebook or Instagram from your phone, or maybe to turn off the TV at 10 p.m., or maybe to reduce the time you spend hanging out with people that don't support you, these are all tough decisions, but they may be necessary to create the space for what you actually want to bring into your life. So for example, When I decided to run a marathon several years ago, I suddenly had to make space in my life for a lot of running that I wasn't yet doing. It meant that I had to make quite a few tough decisions, including waking up a lot earlier and also therefore getting to bed a lot earlier. And I had to let go of waking up with my young daughters at the time, they were young, on Sunday mornings so I could be out on that long run. And I had to get to bed early on a Saturday night, so that meant leaving events early and not drinking that night so I could be in shape for my run on Sunday morning. And what makes decisions tough is that sometimes they're not popular. Not everyone will like them. They may make you feel alone and unsupported some of the time, but that's part of how we grow. So just imagine the tough choices Olympic athletes have to make, or authors, or astronauts. To do the things they really want to do, they had to make really tough choices. But luckily for all of us, they did, because we get to be inspired by all of them. And in addition to making tough choices, you also need the skill of focusing on the discomfort, which is kind of counterintuitive. It means sticking with something even when you don't feel like it. It's a strange thing because let's say you want to really write a book, but you don't always feel like sitting down and writing when you plan to. It can feel boring or uninspiring. And that's when you'll be tempted by distraction and procrastination. So procrastination doesn't just show up because of things we don't want to do. It actually shows up when we're trying to do something we do want to do. And it's because we don't like the feeling of boredom or the feeling of uncertainty. And that's what would regularly occur for me as I was training for my marathon. I didn't want to run sometimes because mile after mile of running alone was sometimes super boring. And I was very tempted to stop and do anything else but run. But I chose most often to stay with the discomfort, and somehow I made it work. It wasn't always perfect, but I got there. I did the marathon. In his book, 4,000 Weeks, that I mentioned earlier, Burkeman tells the story of an American in the 60s who was training to become a monk in the mountains of Japan. As part of his training, he had to do a solo retreat for 100 days in an unheated hut. And 3 times a day, he had to go and perform a purification ritual, which required him to basically bathe in a bath of melted snow, which, of course, does not sound very pleasant. And it was horribly uncomfortable for him, and he really dreaded it. At first, he would try to distract himself by thinking of anything but what he was doing, but it was still painful. So he switched tactics, and he decided to try completely focusing on the experience. And ironically, what he found was it made it a lot less painful. And the more intensely he focused on the actual experience, the easier it became, which again, counterintuitive, right? But it shows us that as much as we want to distract ourselves, and we do distract ourselves very easily these days, the more we actually do suffer. I can tell you that as much as I want to write and create these podcasts, I struggle when I sit down to even write this very episode. But once I give into the process and truly focus on what I want to write, then the ideas start to flow so much easier, and I get it done without much struggle. Same with the marathon, right? I found the running a whole lot easier when I didn't distract myself, and instead I just paid attention to the experience and to what I was feeling. And I also do something similar when it comes to cravings, and it's a strategy I help my clients with. I call it sitting with discomfort. And what it means is that when a craving shows up, sit with it for 2 minutes without distraction. So without going on your phone or watching TV, just sit and feel the emotion as it shows up. Once you feel it, you realize it's not urgent and it's really not as bad as you thought. It's never as horrible as what you think you're trying to avoid. And when you realize that, it is so empowering. So there you have it. I've given you 3 steps to managing your activities so that you can do it in the time you have. So the first one is clarifying what you want, then defining and focusing on the small steps to get there, and then be forgiving. Those are the 3 steps. And then the 2 skills are making tough choices and focusing on the discomfort. So I hope that you can use some of what I've shared with you today and that you can apply it. And I'm so grateful that you were here today to join me. And if you enjoyed this episode or if you learned something new, I'd love you to rate it on Apple or Spotify, or to leave a comment about what you did take away from today. And I really appreciate it. I'll be back next week with a fresh new episode. So keep moving forward, and bye for now. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Midlife Momentum Podcast. If you want to learn more about working with me, come visit me at DebbieHarbeckCoaching.com. That's Debbie, I-E, Harbeck with a C, coaching.com. See you next week.